What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News. I'm your host, Emma Lingan. I am joined today by Michael Augello and Jim Parsons of the Hockey News. And guys, it's just a shame that nothing has really been happening in the hockey world this week. Too bad we've just got absolutely nothing to talk about. Just kidding, of course. There's lots to talk about today with the start of free agency this week. So we will get into all of the latest and greatest in just a moment. But before we do, want to remind you that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. All right, guys, speaking of action, so much of it this week with free agency opening. We've got trades, we've got signings, re-signings, and of course, probably the biggest news just broke in the last couple of hours, and that is that Alex Ovechkin is returning for a 22nd NHL season. He's re-signed with the Washington Capitals on a one-year, $4.25 million deal. So Ovi will be 41 years old when the season starts. He just came off a season where he scored 32 goals, had 64 points. Mike, how do you feel about the Capitals as contenders now with Ovechkin now back? You know, they've already made some big moves. They got Alex Tuch in free agency from Buffalo, and they're kind of look like they're gearing up maybe to take one last run at it with Ovi here. So how do you feel about the moves they've made and how close they are to contention this season?
I mean, I like the moves that they've made, and Spencer Carberry is one of the best coaches in the NHL, and they've given him more weapons to use and utilize. I mean, not only Tuch, who there is the highest paid player on their team, but they had Jordan Kyrou in the deal with St. Louis. They signed Boone Jenner to a 3-year contract. They had Vincent Desharnais on the blue line. They've really restocked the cupboard, and I think they needed to. Sort of take some of the responsibilities off of Ovechkin. I mean, he did score 32 goals last year, but I don't think at age 41 he can really carry that team like he did in the past. So there's a good support structure there. There are a number of young players like Ryan Leonard and Ilya Protas who are coming up through the organization. So I think their general manager and has provided Spencer Carberry with a lot of weapons.
Yeah, as they were making these moves, first with Tuch and then with Kyrou in particular, Jim, I started wondering, well, is this Washington gearing up for life after Ovechkin, or are they trying to make one last run with him? Now we know that it's the latter, but it seems like they have kind of set themselves up as well to continue on after Ovechkin is gone. So what do you think about their chances this year and beyond?
Yeah, I think that was a kind of a consensus yesterday when they started making all the signings that they made and then made the trades. And one really reputable insider got fooled and said, "Oh yeah, this looks like Ovechkin's retiring," but nobody knew for sure, right? But I think for Ovechkin, he had never clearly said he was leaving. He said he thought about it, but he never said he was quitting. And then he had maintained that if he was going to return, one, it was a family question, and then two, it was about, can the Washington Capitals be contenders? And when you add Tuch and you add Kyrou, I'm not sure I love necessarily their free agency day. I think Vincent Desharnais is an interesting signing at that much money. Jenner is a good player, but he's a little older. But I think Ovechkin probably was already going to look at this and go, yeah, this is a decent team. Why would I not return? And the interesting thing about his contract being at 4.25 is it's really not 4.25. It's $9 million, because essentially if he plays 10 games, he gets the extra signing bonus, right? So there's a lot of money there that he could have. And GM Chris Patrick said, like, we got a way of doing this. So I think they always knew this was going to be happening. So everybody who thought, oh my gosh, this is Ovechkin leaving and they're making plans to move on without him, I think in the background the whole time, it was pretty clear that he was coming back. It was just let them do what they got to do, leave enough space for them to sign what looks like a really team-friendly deal. And it is, but when you've got, $9 million on the table and you've got a decent team that could contend, why would you not come back for one more run? And he's got some personal, goals too, right? Like there's things he wants to achieve before he calls it quits. So I'm not shocked by this at all, actually.
And I think he will now be, if he's not already, the longest tenured professional athlete in DC sports history. As a DC native myself, I have to say that's pretty impressive to see, and really just remarkable to see what he's done throughout his career, which is still not over. Like I said, Washington team to keep an eye on this year. Former member of the Washington Capitals, also in the news this week, and that's John Carlson. He signed a 2-year, $17 million contract with the Tampa Bay Lightning on Wednesday. So that's got an AAV of $8.5 million. So Carlson, 36 years old. He had 60 points in 71 games last year, split between the Anaheim Ducks and the Washington Capitals. He also had 6 assists in 12 Stanley Cup playoff games with Anaheim. The Lightning notably moved on from Darren Radish, who is a right shot defenseman that, Mike, we've talked about on the show before as someone who is going to be one of the bigger names to keep an eye on in free agency. It's interesting, though, because he's 6 years younger. Radish is 6 years younger than Carlson. They got him for the same AAV for 6 less seasons. So, Mike, what do you think of this contract for the Lightning, and how do you see it aging?
It makes a lot of sense for Tampa Bay. I think the problem with Radish is the 8 years. They didn't want to lock themselves up on a 30-year-old defenseman. Carlson is much older, but has a reputation and is a very good power play quarterback. I mean, the future of Victor Hedman is sort of in question after missing more than half the year last year. So I think John Cooper and Julian Breezeball needed to, bolster their blue line a little bit. And now, if you have Ryan McDonough playing on the bottom pairing, that's a nice luxury to have. Now they did have to clear out Nick Paul's $3 million plus contract and traded him to Toronto. They moved on from Oliver Bjorkstrand. They moved in guys like Jeffrey Vial and Ilya Mikheyev. So, there was some changeover in Tampa Bay, but this is the biggest change. And I think they needed Carlson to replace Radish as that big shot from the point, and he should be able to do it. But at his age, I don't know whether he will age well in the first or second year of that contract.
Well, Radish, as I mentioned, has moved on to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and now Carlson coming in to Tampa Bay. Jim, Carlson, I think, kind of ended up being one of the more under the radar best moves of the trade deadline last year when Anaheim acquired him, and he was able to be really effective for them in that second half of the season and then into the playoffs. But what do you think of this contract for the Lightning? How effective do you think that Carlson can be for this team?
I think he's going to be effective. I mean, you know what you're getting, right? Like when he was moved last season at the deadline, I think everybody was kind of shocked that Washington just sort of pulled that out of nowhere. He's still a really good defenseman, even at his age. You know what you're getting. He's a power play quarterback. He's a solid defenseman, has been for a really long time. For Tampa Bay, I think this fits what they're doing, though. You've got a group that's a little bit older. Their window to win is probably a couple of years. There's going to be some players who are contracting out, and you never really know what happens at the end of those terms. And if you got a guy like Radish on an 8-year deal, and the real concern with him is he'll never do what he did last year again, right? So if that's the case, then you know what you're getting with Carlson. You know you've got the similar window with some of the other players. Tampa is the kind of location that if everybody were to leave, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if that were the case, they can just go out and get another bunch of people because it's an attractive place to play. It's an attractive city to live in and a state-free tax. I mean, it's all those things that Tampa can really rebuild if they needed to build and do it quickly. So I think if you're stuck with a guy like Radish, you can't do that as much as you can with a guy like Carlson who fits their window. I also wonder if some of this had to do with the Zach Werenski stuff. They were heavily rumored to be part of that whole conversation. And then when Werenski sort of pivoted back to Columbus and decided, no, I don't really want to go anywhere, Tampa quickly made that decision to do the Carlson thing. So I think he wanted to go there. I think Tampa knew that that was an option for them. I don't think they loved the idea of Radish on 8 years with the window. I think it just works out for everybody. It kind of, makes a lot of sense. And I think Carlson's going to be as productive as he's been. If not, at least one of those 2 years. He might regress a little in the second year, but I think next year he'll be just fine.
And coincidentally, Emma, the 2-year contract for Carlson matches perfectly the 2 years remaining on Zach Werenski's deal. So if that was the motivation, it's perfect.
Well, there you go. And, you talked about, I think, Jim, talking about the narrow window for Tampa Bay to contend here. And I think there are a few teams that sort of find themselves in that very short time frame, that immediate time frame, one of them being the Edmonton Oilers, which is why I'm glad we've got you on the show today, because we need to talk about their goaltending situation. They've actually made some moves to address the goaltending situation. They signed Freddie Andersen to a 1-year, $2.8 million contract. correct on Wednesday. Anderson, of course, had 3.05 goals against average and .874 save percentage in 35 games for the Carolina Hurricanes last season. Not great, but then absolutely turned it on in the playoffs, early in the playoffs, before being replaced by Brendan Bussey. So he was 13-2 in the postseason, 1.89 goals against, .910 save percentage, 3 shutouts in 16 Stanley Cup playoff games. So really night and day from what we saw from him in the regular season. But Jim, you know as well as anyone that goaltending has been the ever elusive challenge that the Oilers have been unable to solve, it seems. And they've gone after all of these different, it seems like, not ideal fits, guys like Tristan Jarry as recently as last year. So with Anderson having the sort of reputation that he does as someone who's maybe not always the most reliable, when he is on, he's on, but he's maybe not the stalwart in net that I think a lot of people would want to see. Do you think that he can be the stabilizing presence for the Oilers that they've been desperately looking for?
Yeah, well, I think he's a legitimate NHL goaltender, which the Oilers have not really had in a very long time. But having said that, I think, Anderson is probably not a full-time starter. He's maybe a 30, 35 game guy. When he's hot, he's hot. And that's why I think when we spoke to Stan Bowman yesterday, right before the Anderson deal was done, and he talked about Jarry, he's going to be returning next season. They talked about Devin Levi, who they traded for from Buffalo, who they think is going to take another step, and they plan on having him around. And he'd have to clear waivers to go down anyway, so they don't think they're moving him. I think they're going to run with 3 goaltenders next year. And I think that could be interesting because I think if you have Anderson, who might not play more than 30 games, but you play him when he's red hot, it could be a really good fit there, right? Now, it's not normal to run with 3 goaltenders anymore, but it's becoming a little bit more common. And I think the Oilers like that idea. Like, they've got Jarry, who could be good, but he really is inconsistent, and you don't know what you're going to get anytime you put him in. Levi hasn't really proven he's that guy yet, but he could be. And Anderson has proven in the past he's that guy, but he might not be anymore. So when you have those 3 together, you have a lot of options that you can look at. And it probably explains why his contract is only $1 million with signing bonuses that get him up. I think it's like 2.6 or 2.8. And it's just 1 year, right? So it's kind of like it's not a prove it deal, but it's like I'm not sure anybody else was really keenly looking at Frederik Andersen. I don't think there was a huge market and need for a bunch of goaltenders. Edmonton had one. Anderson sees an opportunity there, even though there's 3 guys. It just makes a lot of sense. So I think it solves some of the questions. There's still questions, but I think it solves a lot of the problems that Edmonton had walking into the season, which is really interesting considering that prior to the summer, everybody was like, oh man, this goaltending issue is a major problem still. At least some of that is answered today.
Well, some of it, at least for now, I think, the goaltender by committee approach might not always be the most effective. Of course, we won't know until we see him on the ice. But I mean, Mike, what do you make of this situation, having 3 different goaltenders? I mean, you're in Buffalo. You saw how many goaltenders the Sabres cycled through and how, eventually they kind of weed themselves out. But what do you think of this, the Anderson signing for the Oilers, and how do you see their goaltending picture looking this season?
Next season, I will be kicking up my feet, popping some popcorn, and watching the Edmonton Oilers goaltending situation play out because I know Devin Levi very well. He proved a few years ago that he wasn't an NHL goaltender at that point after winning 2 Mike Richter awards at Northeastern University and had a couple good years with Rochester, but his numbers went down as he stayed in the AHL. So this is a new challenge for him, and I'm sure he'll be motivated to make his mark. But the question is whether he's an NHL goaltender, and that's yet to be proven. Freddie Andersen is definitely an NHL goaltender. He's just an old NHL goaltender with a lot of injury issues. Now he is probably one of the few players out there in free agency that would want to play for Mike Babcock, and he did in Toronto for a number of years. I just find it hilarious that Edmonton has brought over the last few years the Toronto 2019-2020 goaltending tandem of Jack Campbell and Freddie Andersen. And all they did was lose in the playoffs. Now Freddie Andersen pushed away that reputation the way he played, but he had the Carolina Hurricanes, one of the better defensive teams of the last few years, in front of him. We know what Edmonton's challenges are. it's playing defense. Now, if Mike Babcock can get them to play better defense, then I think, you know, one of these three goaltenders will work for them. But I have a weird feeling Tristan Jarry should be hunting for condos in Bakersfield, because I have a feeling they may bury him down there unless there's an injury with Anderson and or Levi.
Well, definitely quantity, maybe quality as well, but definitely quantity in Edmonton and net right now. So they seem to be playing the numbers game, at least for now, in goaltending. So we will see there. Mike, you talked about the defense playing in front of the goaltending and Edmonton needing to shore up their defense a little bit. Of course, one of the big moving pieces on their blue line was going to be Darnell Nurse. We knew that he was going to be moving on. The San Jose Sharks have finally started to weaponize some of that cap space that they have. They took on Darnell Nurse and his full $9.25 million contract from the Oilers in exchange for a defenseman, Shakir Mukhamadullin, and prospect Zach Sharp. Then San Jose also acquired Mason Marchment, 5 years, 6.75 per. So, Mike, what do you think of these two moves for the Sharks? And are you surprised that they took on Nurse's full contract without Edmonton retaining any salary?
I'm very surprised. I thought that any team, and maybe one of the reasons why Nurse had to expand his trade list is because the teams out east that he was rumored to go to were expecting Edmonton to take a significant salary back, or take a haircut on a deal that has 4 years left. The addition of Jacob Trouba as a right shot defenseman and Michael Kesselring, who they got from Buffalo, both are signed to long-term deals, and now Nurse. I mean, that gives a veteran group, adds a veteran group along with Sam Dickinson and Dmitry Orlov, who has a year left in his contract. I think that pretty much takes them out of the Morgan Riley sweepstakes, because I don't think they can afford to pay another $7.5 million to another veteran defenseman. But whether that defense will be good enough, I mean, they've got great young forwards. We all know how good San Jose is. And I think some of these players, I think Nurse he needed to get out of Edmonton. I think it was a toxic situation for him. And I think Trouba can still play, but whether they're good enough to get San Jose to a level past into the playoffs and past the first round, that's yet to be seen.
Yeah, we've talked about San Jose needing some help defensively, and obviously they've got that exciting young core that they're still building around here. So these players, Trouba, Marchment, Nurse, obviously a big part of that. But Jim, you've been kind of following the Darnell Nurse saga from an Edmonton perspective. So what do you make of this move? Are you surprised that San Jose took on the whole contract, and how do you see Nurse performing in San Jose?
I'm not surprised at all, actually. I know that the narrative out there is that they were going to have to retain on this. And I know the Oilers going into the trade said they were not going to do that. That was a priority for them. Stan Bowman wanted to make sure he had the cap flexibility. So talk of $2 or $3 million retention just was never going to happen, which is probably why Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Boston were all probably lowballing the Oilers in terms of their offers, if any, were actually made, because there was just a small group of people who were interested in taking on that trade. Once he opened up his window, because he realized the trade was not happening, and then San Jose got involved, and they have a ton of cap space. And anybody who says that they should be worried about the fact they're spending money on Trouba and Nurse just need to look at the cap space for next year. They got plenty. Like, they've got lots of room. And then when maybe Anaheim gets into the mix, and I don't know if they were officially ever in there, but they were interested. Now you have 5 teams, maybe more, who could be making this deal. So it doesn't shock me at all that Nurse was able to be moved without any retention. And when you look at the salary cap now, the Oilers paid for the hard part of Darnell Nurse, right? They paid for the 9.25 when he wasn't giving them real value. Now the salary cap is so high that 9.25 million isn't even that much. Like, if you see Trouba at 8.5, I think Nurse is a better player than Trouba is, right? So you've got a serviceable guy in Darnell Nurse who will be in your top 4. He's proven he can play. He took the Oilers in part to 2 Stanley Cup finals. Yeah, he was ragged on here because he got too much money, but it wasn't his fault. He was still a good defenseman. But when you have that, and he said it in his media interview yesterday, he's like, sometimes when you have a lot of money that you're being paid, there's nothing you can do about it. And he did admit he didn't play as well as he could have at times, but you just can't live that down. So I do think it was toxic. It was one of those things where he couldn't come back, even though I thought maybe there was a window for that to happen. He just wanted to move on. And so when he opened it up to San Jose, it just opened up a bunch of doors for the Oilers. And I think it was pretty easy to fit there. San Jose made a lot of sense, and they were interested from the very beginning. They just needed to get on that list. So it doesn't shock me at all that he was traded. It doesn't shock me there was no salary retention. I think he's a good fit in San Jose. I have no idea how he'll play with a fresh start and a new perspective. But I think San Jose did a good job. I think the Oilers really won here. They picked up Ryan Shea right after that deal, so I think they were looking at him the whole time. They made other signings, spent some money wisely, got the Anderson deal done. So I think this was all sort of a plan that just needed to figure itself out, and San Jose just had to get in the mix. And once they were, it all just sort of fell into place.
Yeah, I like this move for Nurse. And I think that, like you said, he is a prime change of scenery candidate. I think that San Jose will be a good fit for him. San Jose, one of those teams on the rise a little bit, just right on the cusp of kind of entering their contention window with that exciting young core. One team in the West that is, I would say, maybe a step or two ahead of San Jose in their window in terms of contending, because they did make the playoffs last year, is the Utah Mammoth. Now, that's a team that had a very busy opening day of free agency. So they signed Anders Lee to a 3-year deal at $5.4 million per season. They acquired Vincent Trocheck from the New York Rangers in exchange for Sean Durzi, Cole Baudouin, a prospect, and a 2027 third-round pick. So Utah, very, very busy. They're looking to take that next step after making the playoffs last year. Mike, do you like these moves for Utah?
I do. Trocheck is an excellent player. I mean, we saw how well he could play as a checker and depth center on that U.S. Olympic team that won gold. I think he slots in perfectly on Utah as a third-line center behind Logan Cooley and Nick Schmaltz, and with Stenlund as their fourth-line center, and it buys them time for Caleb Desnoyers to stay down in the American Hockey League and gain experience. So but this deal was made possible by them moving out the JJ Peterka contract by trading him for a couple first-round picks to Boston, and also open up cap space to add a veteran like Anders Lee, who's a leader, and adding him to that young group, I think, will really help the Mammoth. The only question I have now is, you moved a right shot defenseman in Durzi, whether you have the internal ability to replace him, or whether you have to go out in free agency if there's anyone else out there, or make a trade to replace him.
Yeah, it seems like the subtractions that Utah made from their roster really not anything remarkable here. I mean, the guys that they moved on from, they really supplemented that core that they have. And so, Jim, what do you think, particularly Trocheck, but also Anders Lee, still an impact forward who can really do some damage here for Utah? Do you think that these are going to be real needle moving moves for them?
Yeah, I do. I think the mix with the veterans and the young guys in Utah, I think that's a nice top 9. You've got some really good young skilled forwards. You added Anders Lee, who I thought was going to Minnesota, to be honest with you. Goes to Utah, chooses them over the Wild. And we're hearing now that he really wanted to call Bill Guerin and tell him himself that he was going to turn that down to go to Utah. So there's something there in Utah that Anders Lee really liked. Trocheck, I think, is a smart move, just because I think his time with the New York Rangers was over. I do believe giving up Durzi is a little bit of an interesting decision. I think he was a player, but it's possible to replace him on that blue line. Utah wanted to make a splash. They made a bit of a splash. They didn't go crazy. They didn't go and spend a fortune in free agency, but they did make some solid moves that I think will make their top 9 a whole lot more balanced and better. What they do on defense will be interesting. They've got solid goaltenders. They've got a pretty good mix there. So I think Utah accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, which was make some changes, add some pieces, move things around a little bit, and get people to notice what they were doing. And I think they did.
Definitely. A couple surprise moves there from Utah. One move that was not really much of a surprise, I think we all saw it coming, was the extension for Rasmus Andersson with the Vegas Golden Knights. That became official with a 7-year, $59.5 million deal on Wednesday. Of course, we know Andersson was traded to Vegas from Calgary back in January, and he helped them reach the Stanley Cup final. So over 81 games during the regular season split between Calgary and Vegas, Andersson finished with 17 goals, 30 assists, averaged just over 23 minutes of ice time per night. He also added 6 assists in the playoffs with Vegas. So, Mike, it seems like it's a recurring topic every year, tale as old as time. The Golden Knights are nearly $8 million over the cap right now. What moves do you think that they need to make or will make to become cap compliant between now and the start of the season?
Mark Stone to the injured reserve, come on down. Well, I don't know, but they will always get down underneath the salary cap. This is the worst kept secret in the world. Just like when they traded for Noah Hannafin from Calgary, they had a contract in the drawer ready to go. But they with Hannafin, they got him signed before the end of that regular season. With Anderson, they waited until July 1st to get it done. They didn't give him the full 8 years. And I think he may have cost himself a few dollars with how he played in the Stanley Cup playoffs. He wasn't overly impressive, but he may have played. It's a situation where, he came in, Bruce Cassidy was the coach, then Tortorella was the coach, adjusting to a new team. And maybe they took that into consideration, but after the assets that they traded for him, he was going to sign there, and that was the only place he wanted to go. So it was a foregone conclusion that Rasmus Andersson was going to end up re-signing with Vegas.
Well, Jim, do you think it's going to be another LTIR move, or are there more moves coming here for Vegas to get under the cap?
Yeah, I'm not a salary cap expert by any means, but from what I can see and how this reads to me, it's pretty obvious what they're doing with Alex Pietrangelo. They're maximizing their LTIR season ending money. Like, they signed Olsen to some really random numbered contract to get to the exact amount that they would have to get to start the season, so that they could be exactly over and maximize that LTIR number. So to me, it's nothing. I think Kelly McCrimmon already came out and said that Pietrangelo's status hasn't changed. He's not going to be playing. He's around the city, but he's not going to return. So they know they're putting him on LTIR. And even if that weren't the case, Vegas just has a way of doing whatever they need to do, right? The fact that they traded Pavel Dorofeev to sign Rasmus Andersson, what I think was a very interesting decision. I think Dorofeev is a big loss for them. So they must have really liked Rasmus Andersson to the point where they were willing to give him up to make sure that that contract could get done. So it's interesting because Vegas always does what Vegas does. They figure out a way. They know how to play the system. They know people will want to play there, and they know people will sign there. So even when they have to give up really solid pieces, they are able to sign guys and attract new players coming in, and they've got that cap system down, and the way they write off players and they do things there, it's just like down to the dollar, like literally the dollar. So I think really we don't have to see any major moves. I think they're just going to shuffle their roster around, put Pietrangelo on LTIR to end the season as soon as the opening of the season begins, and I think they're solid. So yeah, I'm sure they'll do other stuff, because Vegas always does other stuff, but they've maximized their LTIR dollars, and I think that's what this was all about.
Got it down to a science for sure. Big extension for Rasmus Andersson. Another player that signed a big extension this week is Ivan Demidov with the Montreal Canadiens. He signed an 8-year, $73 million contract extension, so $9.125 million per year. The new deal is going to begin in the 27-28 season, so after Demidov's entry-level deal is completed. So Demidov, of course, we know was the runner-up for the Calder Trophy last year. He scored 19 goals and had 62 points in 82 games for Montreal. He added 3 goals and 9 points in the playoffs, helped the Canadiens reach the Eastern Conference Final, where they were knocked out by the eventual Stanley Cup champion Carolina Hurricanes. So, Mike, big commitment, big money for a young player. Do you think this was a bargain, though, considering how young he is?
Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes strike again. I mean, the way they are operating right now, they're sort of mimicking what the Boston Bruins did about a decade ago, locking up Bergeron and Marchand and Krejci, all those guys, to long-term deals for, and they all took a little bit less. They've locked up Hudson and Slavkovsky and Suzuki and Caulfield. And really, what they were paying Demidov is around what they paid Hudson, but the cap went up. So, I mean, this is smart business, and it enables the Canadiens to add players like they did with Noah Dobson. They maybe overpaid Noah Dobson a bit, but because they have that core group locked up, they have the flexibility to be able to do that. So they're really doing a great job in terms of managing the salary cap.
Jim, what do you think of this deal for Montreal? I mean, obviously a big commitment for a young and still relatively unproven player just in terms of years, but an exciting deal nonetheless.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the culture they're building in Montreal there. I mean, when you've got a guy like Demidov, who I think this is a huge bargain, who probably could have asked for a whole lot more and gotten it, I think it speaks to the idea that people want to play in Montreal. I think the only real miss that they've had might be Patrick Laine, right? That was the one player who they added that just didn't really pan out for them. But everybody else has been a steal of a deal. When you look at, Hudson, you look at Slavkovsky, you look at, Caulfield and all those other players, they're good bargain deals now. And as this cap continues to climb and go up, these players are all going to look like they're bargain players, and they're all going to be very productive, many of which have not even hit their ceiling yet. Demidov has not even scratched the surface of what he's going to do. So I think at this number, and when you look around the league at what some of these other players signed for, and he's just a shade above them. Yeah, he's the highest paid player in Montreal now, but that's not what is important to that team. I don't think there's a lot of players on that roster who look at what he's making and go, man, I should have been making that. I think they're all just willing to stay there, take a deal that will allow that club to keep building and add players who will make them better. I think they're all unified in this. Like, we want to do this together. We want to win. We want to add pieces, and we want to do it at a rate that allows Hughes to do what he needs to do. And so far that's playing out.
It is playing out, and exciting to see what they do next year and beyond in Montreal. Do want to wrap up today talking about the Los Angeles Kings. They've made some moves. They've made some interesting moves this week, to say the least. So they have signed a handful of free agents, 5 to be exact, and they would be Matt Zuccarello, Corey Perry, Eric Gustafson, Eric Haula, and Scott Laughton. Now, what do all of these guys have in common? That's right. They are all age 32 or older. So Zuccarello is 38 years old. Corey Perry's 41. Gustafson, 35. Haula, 35. Laughton, 32. Mike, for a Kings team that was already on the older end of the spectrum in terms of the rest of the league, what do you think of these moves for Ken Holland? And do you see them, no pun intended, do you see them aging well?
5 new members of the Southern California Retirement Club. This goes hand in hand with what he did last year with the Cody Ceci signing and Joel Armia and Brian Dumoulin. I mean, he's continuing to add age, and he really didn't address the areas of need for the LA Kings. I mean, Anze Kopitar retires. Now they don't have a number one center. He sort of operated around the periphery. Now, some of these, Zuccarello is only $1 million. Corey Perry is only $1 million, which means at the deadline, they'll flip them for draft picks when they're out of the playoff picture. But I mean, they're not costly, but this is sort of signifies that your organization is so bereft of young talent that you have to keep plugging in the 30 plus players. And that's not a winning formula. Now, Peter Laviolette's coming in as a coach, and maybe he had a rubber stamp on some of these players, but I just think that this is the same old with Ken Holland with the LA Kings. And I don't think it's going to work out well for him.
Yeah, if you need any further advice on how that's going to go, I would say ask Barry Trotz in Nashville how it worked out, adding a lot of veteran players all at once. Jim, it's hard to see this ending well for LA, at least now. I mean, I would like to be surprised pleasantly, but what do you think of these moves for LA, and how do you see it going for him this year?
Yeah, I mean, Ken Holland does this. He did it in Edmonton too, right? He added Corey Perry, he added Duncan Keith, he added a bunch of older players. The difference in Edmonton was that you had a lot of really, really good, elite, young talent that those older guys and veteran leaders could help kind of usher into their careers as NHL players. The Kings don't really have that, right? There's nobody on that roster. And when you look at, guys that are younger and could be sticking around, there's talk about trading them. So it's like, I don't know exactly what the Kings are planning on doing or what Holland's doing. I think he likes proven guys that have a track record, but he risks that they're not going to be productive in their later years, which in a lot of cases, some of these players can still play. But when they fall off a cliff is anybody's guess. And that could happen here this season. It could happen next year. I don't really know. But I think the Kings have basically solidified the fact that if they're going to be a playoff team, it's going to be very, very close. And it's likely that they are not going to be a playoff team. I don't know if people just are not interested in looking at that team and saying, hey, there's somebody that we think is going to be a contender. So there's just contracts for some of these older players, and it's like Michael said, a good place to go and hang out and retire potentially. I'm not really sure what the Kings are going for here, but this is Holland's deal. This is what he does. He likes older guys who have a track record, but maybe can't keep doing what they've been doing in the past. So I don't think it plays out very well for them.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of hope being placed on the shoulders of these very veteran players, and hope is not a plan. But maybe it'll work out for the LA Kings. Who knows? We will see. Of course, lots happening this week. If you want to read any more, dive into more detail about any of the moves, the players, the contracts, the trades, any of that we've talked about here today on the show, you can head over to the Hockey News. It's been the go-to for all things hockey since 1947. 12 issues packed with game and player insights, plus a free issue to start. It's a must-have for any fan. Head to thn.com/free and grab your subscription today. That's going to do it for today's episode of The Wraparound. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. We really do appreciate it. As we shift into full off-season mode, we will be going down to one episode per week starting next week. So we will be here every Thursday throughout the off season. So check back with us next Thursday. For now, for Michael Augello and Jim Parsons, I'm Emma Lingan. This is The Wraparound, and we will see you next time.